Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of the VALPRO Path podcast series. My name is Dusan Chenets from Food Scale Hub, where we're proud to lead the dissemination, communication, and exploitation efforts for the VALPRO Path project. Today we have a special guest joining us, Dr. John Deely from TEAGASC. John is a TEAGASC research officer working on the DAFM-funded ComMEATted project. The project aims to explore Europeans' willingness to incorporate more plant-based meat alternatives, insects, and cell-cultured meats into their diets, giving a more detailed look into the European market that can contribute to the VALPRO Path mission of pioneering fresh possibilities and validations and showcasing ways to enhance plant protein production for feed and food in the EU. So, John, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be
Yeah,
here.
and thank you, so much for joining us today. So let's dive right into it. So, these alternative protein products, plant-based, insect-based, and cell-cultured, that the ComMEATted project is working on are still quite new. Some aren't even available in many European countries. Based on your research, do we have a good understanding of what consumers actually think about them?
Yeah, it's interesting, both within our project and in the research more broadly. We kind of group these three things as meat alternatives, but from a consumer perspective, they're very, very different products. In some senses, one could group insects and cell culture together because there's a sense of disgust evoked by consumers for both products. So it seems quite obvious, I suppose, in respect of insects. Many people culturally are brought up to think that insects aren't a food group. They're not something that we're supposed to eat. But equally, we see that same kind of disgust with cell cultured meats in that it's a new technology. People are unsure, are afraid of this new thing that's coming online. They don't know what's going to happen to them 10 years down the line if they were to continue to eat these products. But with plant-based meat alternatives, it's kind of a totally different situation. So for many people, we've already brought them into our diets. We already see that they are something that can be consumed, that are something that are good for us in certain respects, and that over the last 5 or 6 years have grown enormously in terms of the technology that makes them more texturally and taste pleasant and more meat-like.
Yeah, when you said that, the technology, and we are trying to make it more meat-like, so people couldn't let's say taste the difference. Over the
Mhm.
last few years, we have seen a major rise in plant-based meat alternatives, with brands trying to mimic the taste and texture of meat. But
Mhm.
beyond the taste, what are the real driving forces behind consumer interest in these products?
Yeah, so there's kind of three other core ideas around it. Firstly, environmental reasons. For each of these three products, the idea is that they can be produced producing less carbon emissions, less methane, less pollutants into the atmosphere. And so people think as a consumer, I can lower my own personal carbon footprint by selecting a product that doesn't emit as much damage to the environment. The second aspect tends to be health. So there seems to be a growing, maybe recognition that an overindulgence in livestock-based products can be, in certain senses, harmful to one's health. So if we have a more balanced diet, we can reduce the amount of harm. And this balanced diet doesn't necessarily just mean putting vegetables on the plate along with meat. It may mean replacing the protein that's actually on the plate for a plant-based meat alternative. And the other one, I suppose, is the longest held one. It's animal welfare. So most people who go for a vegan vegetarian diet, it's because they're concerned with the animal welfare. They're concerned about the amount of harm that is caused to animals through our livestock-based consumption and by transitioning into particularly plant-based meat alternatives. But equally, it seems to be the case for cell culture, or at least will be the same for cell culture meats, that we can reduce the amount of harm that is actually happening to animals on the planet.
Yes, so we went through the biggest interests of consumers in our products. At VALPRO Path, we are focused on improving plant protein production in Europe, specifically in crops like chickpeas, peas, soybeans, lentils, and faba beans. But even if consumers are interested, integrating these products into their, let's say, everyday diets can be challenging. What are the biggest barriers you see when it comes to changing people's dietary habits to plant protein or any kind of other protein that isn't meat-based?
Yeah, so this is a big part of the ComMEATted project. It's looking at practices. So most of what we do in terms of what we eat day to day, it's routine. It's embedded in us. So if you grew up in a household that for 20 years you ate meat, you have so much embedded knowledge. You've eaten 100 different types of meats, so many recipes, and the way you conceptualize what a dinner is, that main meal of the day, you probably think of it as having vegetables and a livestock-based protein on your plate. So one of the large challenges is getting people to realize that you could have a plant-based protein like in VALPRO Path. The introduction of that kind of protein could increase a more balanced diet, but also we have issues around the skills. So again, if you spend 20 years eating livestock-based proteins and you want to start eating plant-based proteins, do you have the knowledge to actually cook with them? Do you know what skills you need? Do you even know what they should taste like when you're finished eating them? So I think the two largest challenges are actually changing the perception of what a meal could be, that it can include plant-based proteins, but also in combination with that, enhancing the skills of people so that they're able to cook with these different products.
Mm. But yeah, we're talking now only about, yes, the consumers, but of course, consumer demand is only a part of, let's say, of the equation.
Mhm,
For these products to be widely available, farmers also need to be willing to grow more, let's say, plant protein crops or to change their farming ways. What do
mhm,
you think are the main challenges in getting more European farmers involved in this transition?
mhm. So recently within ComMEATted, we've been interviewing rather, both food processors and farmers. And our little definition of a food processor is someone who takes an agricultural product, tillage beef, meat, and makes it into the product you see on the shelf. So within those interviews, what we have done is ask them what they think about these products. And they have been very pragmatic. They say that, at least within Ireland, farming as a whole could produce these plant-based proteins. Now, it will differ between regions. Certain regions will have more easily for grazing and more easy for tillage, but their pragmatic approach says that they will be able to produce this. But what's holding them back is the market. So if there is not a big enough demand for consumers that are willing to pay a price that is reasonable to the producer won't go into that market. What one also needs to recognize is that a farmer will make a trade-off in its decision. So if beef is selling really well at a really high price, the protein for them to want to go into it must equally give them a good return. So I think the biggest challenges aren't, at least at a nationwide level, aren't around these things that we could do to make production more successful. It's really around making the market as a whole inviting for the producers to come into.
Yes. So the market is one of the things we will be then looking at in the future of
Mhm,
how it affects the, let's say, alternative protein market. And given everything that we have discussed now, from consumer interest to challenges in adoption and the potential to increase to increase the alternative protein, let's say, production,
mhm.
where do you see the future of alternative proteins in Europe? Could they really become a, let's say, a mainstream part of the European diet? So let's say for lunch, dinner, or just a morning breakfast. Can we truly just put away the meat protein and adopt an alternative?
I think, again, the three products within ComMEATed need to be broken up when trying to think about this. It seems unlikely within Western cultures that insects will become a mainstay. It seems like there's too many cultural barriers to actually stop that from happening. Plant proteins, on the other hand, they really have been adopted to some level. You see many more people who term themselves flexitarian, meaning that they sometimes eat plants as well as the meat. And there's a big push towards that. So I think their adoption will come along quickly. I think growth has slowed since about 2019, but there's still a big increase in the number of people who are interested in these, not only as a vegetarian or vegan diet, but as part of a holistic diet. The cell culture meats are an interesting uh, product in that we are still very unsure about the technology behind it. So one can produce a cell culture meat. We've been able to do that for the last 12 years. But in order to produce them at scale and produce them at a price that people are willing to pay, that seems to be very difficult. At the same time, we are unsure exactly how far along the technology is because a lot of it's proprietary. When you have big industries doing it, they don't necessarily tell you exactly how far along they are. And we're also considered about the culture that the meat actually grows in and being able to use a vegetable-based culture as opposed to a livestock-based culture. But I think that cell culture meats could become a prominent part of our diets. I think the disgust that I talked about at the very beginning, that will be overcome by familiarity, which is true of all products. So once people see that everyone else is eating it and eating it at a price they can afford, I think they will start adopting more cell culture meats if the technology can get there.
So time will tell where we stand. Well, we we made it to the end of our little discussion here, and want to thank you, John, for joining us today. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in into the VALPRO Path podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any updates. If you have any ideas or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out on our social media, or if you have any more, do you want to learn more about the ComMEATted project, you can always reach out to John and he will gladly inform you about all of the possibilities intelligent proteins can reach in Europe. And of course, stay connected and stay tuned with us.
Thank you very much.